He fired me on a Tuesday morning and called it IT issues, like my job was a loose cable he could yank and forget. We were in the glass meeting room he loved because it made him look bigger than he was. Blaine Mercer sat at the head of the table with a laptop open, a legal pad beside it, and that practice sympathetic face managers wear when they've already decided. Production went down again, he said. Investors are watching. We need stability. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked the only question that mattered. Do you want the truth or do you want a scapegoat? He didn't blink. I want results. The truth was painfully boring, and that's why it was dangerous. Their last outage wasn't some mysterious IT failure. It was an expired certificate finance ignored for weeks. The downtime before that was a core switch running hot because they refused to approve a replacement. I'd been sending risk memos since the day we signed our first enterprise customer. Short, clear emails with dates, consequences, and what we needed to fix. But Blaine didn't want memos. He wanted a name he could hand to the board. He slid a termination letter across the table like he was handing me a receipt. Effective immediately, he said. I scanned it. Failure to meet performance expectations. Operational instability. Clean corporate language covering a messy truth. I looked up. You're doing this because it's easier than admitting you built a company on shortcuts. That thin smile appeared, the one he used whenever he thought he was being firm. Please return your badge. I placed it on the table. Calm enough that it scared me. Outside the meeting room, the office kept moving like nothing had happened. People looked away. A couple of heads dipped in that fake empathy way, like they were watching someone else's car accident and hoping it wouldn't splash onto them. Security walked me out with a cardboard box, 2 pens, a notebook, my mug with a chip on the rim, and a spare key fob I'd asked for months ago and never gotten. By the time I hit the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A message from Nate, one of our back-end engineers. Personal number. This is not on you, he's spinning it. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. My first instinct was to respond with facts. Attach screenshots. Prove everything. Defend myself. But in that moment, I realized something colder. Blaine didn't fire me because he believed I'd failed. He fired me because I was the last person in that company who still said the word no. And he thought that removing me would remove the problem. He was wrong, because he didn't know who else I was outside that office. He didn't know that the building we rented, Suite 2B at Ridgeway Commons, wasn't leased directly from some anonymous corporate landlord. It was leased from my uncle's small real estate LLC, and I was the one who managed the property. I didn't own the building. I didn't get to invent rules. I didn't get to hack anything or do anything cute. But I did have the lease in a file drawer, and I knew exactly what it said. Getting fired doesn't always mean you lost. Sometimes it means the other side panicked. If you're ever blamed for a system failure, don't argue in the hallway. Collect your timeline. People can deny your feelings. They can't deny dated documents. I didn't go home after they walked me out, not because I had some dramatic plan, because if I went home, I was going to sit there and replay that meeting 100 times until it turned into shame. So I drove straight to Ridgeway Commons. It's not some glossy tower. It's a practical 3-floor building with 8 suites, a lobby that always smells faintly like carpet cleaner, and an elevator that hesitates, like it's thinking about its life choices. My uncle bought it years ago as a stable asset. I handled tenant requests, vendor scheduling, compliance paperwork, and lease renewals. It was boring work, which is exactly why it stayed profitable. I unlocked my small management office, turned on the desk lamp, and just sat there for a minute. My hands were steady, but my chest wasn't. That's the part nobody sees when you try to act professional through betrayal. The pressure behind your ribs that makes you feel like you're breathing through a straw. I opened the tenant file for Suite 2B, Lumen Stack. Blaine's company, same logo on the folder, same smiling modern branding, same rent payments that always arrived late, but never late enough to trigger a penalty. I pulled the lease out and started reading like I'd never seen it before. Not because I forgot it, because my brain needed something objective to hold on to. Page after page, it was standard language. Term, rent, utilities, insurance, maintenance responsibilities. Then I hit the section that always made tenants roll their eyes when I explained it. Alterations in building systems. No changes to electrical, data, fire safety, or mechanical systems without prior written consent from landlord. Unauthorized work constitutes default. Tenant must restore the space at its own expense. Failure to cure permits termination. I read it twice. Slowly. A simple clause, not a trick, not a loophole. Just the kind of rule people ignore until it becomes a weapon. And then I remembered something so clearly it made my jaw tighten. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been doing a routine walkthrough when I saw their temporary contractor in the hallway with a ladder and a coil of cable. He was feeding lines through the ceiling plenum like he owned it. I'd stopped him, polite, firm. "Do you have a work order approved by building management?" He'd shrugged and said, "The CEO told me to just get it done." I'd sent Blaine an email that same day, short and direct, saying unauthorized cabling and penetrations weren't permitted, and that he needed written approval and licensed vendors. He never replied. And now, sitting alone in that office, I realized the shape of the truth. He didn't just fire me to protect investors. He fired me because I was the person who documented risk. Because I was the person who wrote things down. And people like Blaine can survive complaints. They can survive angry conversations. What they can't survive is a clean paper trail. I pulled up the building's vendor sign-in log and called Hector, our maintenance lead. Hector has the kind of memory that makes dishonest people nervous. "Hey," I said, "quick question. Suite 2B, have they had after-hours vendors in recently?" Hector didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, twice last weekend, and again 2 nights ago, guys with drills. I told them they need to schedule through us." "Did they?" "Nope." I closed my eyes for a second, not from satisfaction, more like I'd finally found the solid ground under my feet, because that's what it felt like. Not revenge, control. I opened a blank document on my laptop and titled it Timeline. Date, what I observed, what I warned them about, what the lease required, what they did anyway. Then I opened my email archive and searched for the message I'd sent Blaine 2 weeks earlier. There it was. Subject line. Unauthorized cabling/ceiling access. Approval required. I clicked it and stared at the sent time. And in that moment, the anger did something strange. It sharpened. Because now the story wasn't, "I got fired for IT issues." The story was, he blamed me for problems he created, while he was violating the same lease that kept his company alive. I didn't know it yet, but that Tuesday morning in the glass meeting room wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the part where Blaine had to live inside his own decisions. If you're ever dealing with someone who rewrites reality, don't fight them in words. Fight them in records. A clean timeline turns "he said, she said" into "here's what happened." And once you have that, the power shifts quietly but permanently. By Wednesday, the lie had already grown legs. A recruiter I'd worked with texted me casually, "Hey, saw you're available. Sorry about the situation at Lumenstack." I stared at that message and felt something sour settle in my stomach. Because that's how it works. Nobody says fired. They say situation. They say fit. They say performance. They use soft words so the damage can travel faster without sounding cruel. I didn't respond to the recruiter. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call old coworkers to plead my case. Instead, I did what I always did when systems failed. I audited. I pulled every relevant document into one folder. The lease, the building rules addendum, the vendor sign-in logs, Hector's maintenance notes, and my own email, warning about the unapproved cabling work. I printed hard copies because paper hits differently when you're dealing with adults. Then I called Marisa Bandare, the landlord attorney my uncle used when a tenant got creative. She didn't do drama. She did clean outcomes. "Tell me what you have," she said. I walked her through it. No speeches, no anger, just facts. Tenant performed unauthorized work on building systems. Prior warning given. No written approval. Repeated violations, potential liability. Cure notice possible under lease. There was a short pause. Then Marisa said, "If your documentation is as clean as you're describing, this is straightforward." "Blaine's going to claim it's retaliation," I said. "He can claim anything," she replied. "We don't argue with claims. We answer with exhibits." That sentence landed like a weight in the best way. Exhibits. Not feelings. Not morality. Exhibits. By noon, Marisa had drafted a formal inspection notice, standard access clause, business hours, stated reason, verification of compliance with building systems policies, 48 hours, professional, legal, and clean enough that nobody could honestly call it harassment. I sent it from the management email, not my personal account. I attached the managing agent authorization letter, because I knew Blaine would try to pretend I wasn't allowed to do my job. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up, a blocked call. I let it ring. Another, then a text from an unknown number. "This is Blaine. Stop this." I didn't reply, because the moment you reply to someone like him, you're not communicating. You're negotiating your own position. I forwarded the text to Marisa and added it to the folder. More exhibits. Thursday morning, I walked to Suite 2B with Hector and a licensed low-voltage contractor we used for compliance checks. Not a mystery expert, a real vendor with a license number and a reputation to protect. Lumenstack's receptionist stood up like she'd been waiting for a fight. "You can't be here," she said, voice too loud. "I'm here as managing agent for Ridgeway Commons," I answered, calm. "We provided notice. Please notify your office manager." They made us wait in the lobby like punishment was a chair. That was fine. I wasn't there to win a social moment. I was there to confirm facts. Blaine finally appeared. Jaw set, smile glued on. "This is inappropriate," he said quietly. "You're upset you got fired." I nodded once. "This isn't about my employment. This is about the building." His eyes flicked past me to the contractor's badge and clipboard. The smile tightened. We walked the suite. And the second the contractor looked up at the ceiling grid above their server closet, his expression changed. He didn't need to touch anything to see it. Unpermitted cable runs, penetrations without proper fire stopping, lines tied off where they shouldn't be, and a power setup that screamed, "We did this fast," and hoped nobody noticed. Hector leaned in, silent, the kind of silence that comes from someone imagining liability. The contractor asked a simple question. "Who authorized this work?" Blaine waved a hand like the question itself was insulting. "It's just cabling," he said. "We needed it done." The contractor didn't argue. He just looked down at his notes. "This isn't compliant," he said. "And if there's a fire or incident, your insurance will ask who approved it. Right now, the answer is nobody." Blaine's face tightened. "We're a startup. You can't expect forms for everything." I kept my voice level. "That's exactly what the lease expects." For a second, nobody spoke. Then Blaine did what he always did when cornered. He tried to turn it personal. "You're enjoying this," he said low. "You think you're getting back at me?" I didn't take the bait. "I'm documenting the condition of the suite," I answered. "That's all." The contractor took photos. Hector logged observations. I asked for copies of any permits or approvals. They had none. When we left, Blaine followed us into the hallway. "You don't understand what you're doing," he muttered. I stopped and faced him. "I understand," I said. "I just don't think you do." And that was the moment I felt it. The shift. Not triumph. Not gloating. Just the cold realization that he couldn't fire me out of this role. And he couldn't talk his way out of a clause written in black ink. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. When someone tries to make it personal, keep it procedural. That's how you stay unbreakable. The more you avoid emotional back and forth, the more your documentation becomes the story. And once the story is written in records, not rumors, it stops being theirs to control. The cure notice went out Friday at 5 p.m. Clean subject line, clear deadlines, specific remediation steps, approved vendor list, requirement to restore and certify the work, Blaine replied in under an hour. Received, we will resolve. This is being handled. That was his favorite phrase. Being handled. Like reality was a customer service ticket. Monday morning, Hector called me before I'd finished my first coffee. They're inside already, he said. No sign in. 2 guys, ladder, drill. I grabbed my keys and drove over. In the hallway outside Suite 2B, their contractor was feeding cable into the ceiling like he was racing a clock. No badge, no permit packet, no fire-stopping kit, just speed. Stop, I said, firm. He didn't even look down at first. I'm working. You're working without authorization, I replied. Pack up, now. He finally looked at me, irritated. The CEO told me. Then the CEO can tell you to leave, I said. Blaine appeared behind him, red-faced, eyes glossy with that particular kind of stress that turns confident people into loud people. Are you enjoying this? He snapped. I kept my voice level. I'm enforcing the lease. He stepped closer like he wanted to make me flinch. This is retaliation, he hissed. You got fired, and now you're trying to ruin us. I didn't move. You're in default. You have a cure window. Follow the steps in the notice. His mouth tightened. We're fixing it. Not like this, I said. Not with unapproved vendors and more violations. For a second, he looked like he might actually listen. Then he did what he always did. He tried to bully the problem into shrinking. You don't understand what you're messing with, he said. We have a funding round. We have contracts. You can't just... I can, I interrupted calmly, because you signed it. His eyes flicked just once toward the lease clause he suddenly remembered existed. That afternoon, Marissa emailed him a follow-up. Cease all work immediately, submit remediation plan, provide vendor licenses, schedule supervised access, and confirm restoration steps. Blaine responded with a PDF that looked official until you read it. It was a 1-page contractor statement. With no license number, no company address, no scope details, and a signature that might as well have been a doodle. Marissa replied with 1 sentence. This does not satisfy the cure requirements. On Tuesday, they tried a different tactic. They flooded us with emails, dozens, screenshots, vague promises, photos taken at angles that hid the ceiling penetrations, a timeline that claimed everything was already resolved. Hector walked the suite that same day. Nothing was resolved. The unapproved cable runs were still there. The penetrations weren't sealed properly. The power setup was still wrong. And, worst of all, they'd moved things around to make it look cleaner, like mess was the only issue. They thought it was about appearances. It was about liability. On Wednesday, Blaine stopped pretending. He called Marissa directly and left a voicemail that sounded like a man trying to intimidate a wall. You're jeopardizing our business, he said. We will pursue damages. We will... Marissa forwarded it to me with a note. Add to file. Exhibits. Thursday morning, I got an email from their insurance broker. Copied to Blaine, copied to an address I didn't recognize. Subject line, urgent, building compliance issue. The unknown address belonged to someone with an investor domain signature. They were watching now. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even feel satisfied. I felt something closer to clarity. Blaine wasn't trying to cure. He was trying to outtalk the deadline, and deadlines don't care how persuasive you are. Friday, last day of the cure window, Marissa sent the final compliance checklist again at 9 a.m., politely, like we still lived in a world where people did what they agreed to do. At 11 a.m., Hector texted me a photo from the hallway. 2 more contractors, ladder, drill. At noon, Blaine emailed, We are cured. You have no grounds. At 1 p.m., the licensed contractor we'd used for inspection emailed his updated findings after a brief recheck. Non-compliance persists. Unauthorized work remains. Restoration incomplete. At 2 p.m., Marissa drafted the next notice. Termination of lease for uncured default. I read it once, then again. Every sentence was boring. Every sentence was lethal. We served it the same day properly. Delivery method per lease. Documentation attached. Cure failure referenced with dates. By evening, the blocked calls started again. I didn't answer. Then a message came through from Nate, the engineer, short and nervous. Blaine just told the team the landlord is attacking us. He said he'll handle it. People are scared. I stared at that line. Handle it. Because I knew what handle it meant in his mouth. It meant someone else would pay for his choices. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. Because the next email wasn't from Blaine. It was from the investor address. Can you confirm, it read, whether eviction proceedings are being initiated against Lumen Stack and the expected timeline? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. This wasn't gossip anymore. This was due diligence. This was their money. I typed a response with no emotion and no extra words. Yes, tenant is in default. Lease termination has been served. Legal process is underway. When I hit send, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a technician watching a system finally accept the command it had been ignoring. And I knew what came next, because in commercial eviction, once the paper's clean, the calendar starts moving fast. A lot of people think consequences are dramatic. They're not. They're scheduled. When someone keeps violating the same rule while promising they've fixed it, believe the pattern, not the email. Stay factual, stay procedural, and let deadlines do what arguments never will. Once the lease was terminated, everything got quieter on my side and louder on theirs. That's how it always goes. When you stop arguing and start filing, you don't have to talk much anymore. The process speaks for you. Marissa filed for possession the following week, not as some theatrical move, just the next step under the lease and state procedure. We attached the notices, the inspection photos, the vendor logs, and the written warning I'd sent Blaine weeks before I was fired. That email mattered more than anything else because it proved one simple thing. This wasn't personal. This was predictable. Their attorney tried to frame it like a feud. He said my employment dispute created a conflict. He hinted I was retaliating. He tried to make the judge see emotion. Marissa didn't react. She didn't even look annoyed. She just placed the file in order and walked the judge through it like it was a checklist. Unauthorized alterations to building systems. No written approval. Written warning issued while I was still employed. Inspection confirming non-compliance. Cure notice served with clear requirements. Failure to cure within the window. Termination served per lease. It wasn't a story. It was a sequence. The judge asked their side one question that sounded harmless but wasn't. Do you have documentation showing the alterations were authorized or properly cured? Blaine's attorney started talking fast. They offered a vague contractor statement again. They argued it was minor. They said it was industry standard. The judge didn't interrupt. He just waited until they ran out of words. Then he looked down at our exhibits and said calmly that the lease language was clear and the default was supported. Possession to landlord. Writ to issue after the statutory waiting period. No speech. No moral lecture. Just a decision. When the clerk stamped the order, I felt something unclench in my chest that I didn't realize I'd been holding for weeks. Not happiness. Relief. The timeline did the rest. Their office changed overnight, like a party after the lights come on. You could see it through the glass. Boxes piling up, desks stripped, the neon sign disappearing, people carrying monitors to cars and avoiding eye contact with the lobby. Hector told me they tried to negotiate by offering a partial cure and asking for more time. Marissa's response was polite and final. Tenant had the opportunity to cure. Tenant did not cure. On the last day, the constable met us at Suite 2B. Hector was there. The locksmith was there. The building's compliance vendor was there. No cameras, no shouting. No viral moment, just a small group of adults executing a legal order. Blaine arrived late, breathing hard like he'd been running from something he couldn't outrun. He kept talking on his phone, too loud, trying to sound like he still had control. Then he saw me. His voice dropped. "You're really doing this," he said, like I'd betrayed him. I held his gaze and answered the only honest thing. "You did this. I'm just finishing the paperwork." He stared at me for a second and I could see it. The part of him that still wanted to believe he could talk his way out of a locked door. The constable asked for the keys. Blaine hesitated just long enough to make it pathetic, then handed them over. The locksmith changed the cylinder. The click was small, almost nothing, but it was final. When the door shut, Blaine didn't explode. He didn't make a scene. He just stood there, shoulders stiff, eyes unfocused, like his brain was trying to blame someone and couldn't find an angle that worked. He walked away without looking back. After that, the cleanup was boring and clean. We billed LumenStack for restoration costs per the lease. Licensed vendors removed the unpermitted cabling. Fire stopping was corrected. Ceiling tiles were replaced. The suite was restored to code. 2 months later, Suite 2B was leased to a quiet accounting firm that paid on time, submitted proper work orders, and never once treated basic compliance like an insult. As for me, I didn't win a prize. I didn't become a celebrity. I didn't ruin a man's life. I just stopped carrying his chaos. I found a new role at a company that believed in budgets for redundancy and renewals. On my first week, I flagged a renewal risk, and the CFO said, "Put it in writing. We'll approve it." I drove home that night and laughed once, alone in my car, because I realized how insane my old life had become. Blaine emailed me months later, a long message about pressure, misunderstandings, how he didn't mean it, how we should talk like professionals. I didn't reply, because the most professional thing I ever did was accept his decision and enforce mine. And if there's one lesson I'll carry from that whole mess, it's this. Power isn't who can fire you. Power is who can stay calm long enough to read what was signed. The cleanest karma is consequences delivered through the process people thought they could ignore. If you build your case on documents instead of emotions, you don't need to scream to be believed. And when the final door closes, you don't just get revenge, you get your life back.